Correct your intentions. Be in this session for the sake of Allah, seeking His reward only. قال المؤلف رحمه الله, said the author, may Allah have mercy upon him, وأما تمسك بعض الوهابية لدعوة ابن تيمية هذه. Now concerning some Wahhabis holding fast to this claim of Ibn Taymiyah. What was Ibn Taymiyah's claim? We were talking about the hadith of the blind man that contains the dua of need. And that the Prophet ﷺ, he taught the blind man this dua that contains calling on the Prophet in the Prophet's absence, because he told the blind man to go somewhere else and to do it. So the blind man did what the Prophet told him to do, and then he came back. And in that dua, you say, Allahumma inni as'aluk, oh Allah, I indeed ask you, wa atawajjahu ilayka binabiyyika Muhammad, or binabiyyina Muhammad, and I turn myself to you by your Prophet, or by our Prophet. Both of those are valid. Muhammadin Nabiy al-Rahmah, Muhammad, the Prophet of mercy. Ya Muhammad, here. Oh Muhammad, that's part of the supplication. The Prophet told the blind man to say this supplication that contains calling the Prophet, and to say it somewhere else, not in the Prophet's presence. And then the blind man did what the Prophet told him to do, alayhi salatu wassalam, and then he came back and he was seeing. And also the Sahaba narrated this dua after the Prophet's death. So this proves that one might call on the Prophet in his absence without worshiping him, or after his death without worshiping him. And in fact, there's room for it to be incorporated into a recommended practice. So what did Ibn Taymiyah say? He made a ta'wil, an alternative interpretation for this hadith. And he said, it means we ask Allah by the Prophet's dua, not by the Prophet's self. And so we say, this is an alternative interpretation that lacks evidence. The hadith itself says, Binabika, by your Prophet, or in another rendition, Binabina, by our Prophet. So why would you interpret that what's intended here is by the dua of our Prophet instead of by our Prophet himself? So he's trying to divert that to something else other than the Prophet himself, alayhi salatu wassalam, to support his devious beliefs. So that's what Ibn Taymiyah said, and that's how we responded to him, that he's making an interpretation, an alternative interpretation. And alternative interpretation is invalid without definitive intellectual evidence or confirmed documentary evidence. He doesn't have either one of those. So that's Ibn Taymiyah's claim. And the Shaykh now says, as for some Wahhabis adhering to or clinging to, holding fast to Ibn Taymiyah, this claim of Ibn Taymiyah, fi riwayati hadithi Tirmidhi, in at-Tirmidhi's version of the hadith, alladhi fihi, that version that has in it this wording, Allahumma shaffi'hu fiyya wa shaffi'ni fi nafsi. Oh God, cure him by me and cure me by myself. So Shaykh saying, the Wahhabis, they supported Ibn Taymiyah's claim that we just debunked by bringing this rendition of at-Tirmidhi that, like normal when it comes to Wahhabis, doesn't even say what they are saying. فلا ولا يفيد أنه لا يتبرك بذات النبي. This excerpt from this rendition of the hadith does not mean that there is no blessing sought from the Prophet himself alayhi salatu wassalam. بل التبرك بذات النبي إجماع. In fact, though, seeking blessings from the Prophet himself is a consensus that it's valid. لم يخالفه أحد لم يخالفه إلا ابن تيمية, and no one opposed this but Ibn Taymiyah, the deviant. والرسول هو الذي قال فيه القائل. The messenger is the one about whom that poet said, وأبيض يستسقى الغمام بوجهه ثمال اليتامى عصمة للأرامل. I don't know how to translate this line of poetry, but praises the Prophet alayhi salatu wassalam, and it has in it the confirmation of tawassul by him alayhi salatu wassalam. Al-Bukhari produced this line. وَأَمَّا تَوَسُّلُ عُمَرَ بِالْعَبَّاسِ وَأَمَّا تَوَسُّلُ عُمَرَ بِالْعَبَّاسِ. Now concerning another case that the Wahhabis would bring up to you. So this is how you answer it. It is the case of Umar ibn al-Khattab making tawassul by Al-Abbas, the Prophet's uncle. بعد موت النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم, after the Prophet's death صلى الله عليه وسلم. Meaning, he didn't make tawassul by the Prophet in this story, he made tawassul by the Prophet's uncle. فليس لأن الرسول قد مات. He didn't do that because the messenger died. That's how Wahhabi will push something on you. Yani, he's going to say to you, don't you know that Umar ibn al-Khattab made tawassul by Al-Abbas after the Prophet's death sallallahu alayhi wasallam? And if you didn't know the story, you'd say, no, I don't know about that. He'd say, yeah, that's the case. This is true. And why he did that? Why didn't he make tawassul by the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam? The Prophet is better than Al-Abbas. He didn't make tawassul by the Prophet because the Prophet already passed away. Had it been okay to make tawassul by the Prophet after his death, Allah wouldn't have left that out to make tawassul by someone who's inferior to the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. It was because the one he was making tawassul by was alive and present. This hadith is a great example of the corrupt mind of Wahhabi. Because the hadith doesn't say any of that stuff, none of it. بل كان لأجل رعاية حق قرابته من النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم. It wasn't because the Prophet died that Umar ibn al-Khattab did this. It doesn't say so anywhere in the hadith. Rather, it was because of observing the status of relationship to the Prophet ﷺ, observing the status of kinship to the Prophet ﷺ. Al-Abbas is the Prophet's uncle. So just like this one right here, Wahhabi is going to tell you many things, and a lot of other people also are going to say to you, try to prove to you wrong things. Many people are going to try to prove wrong things to you, and they're going to bring you an ayah or a hadith. And if you pay attention, you're going to see that this ayah or hadith does not say what they are saying. You're going to have to bring that out for them and stick to that. Don't let them brush that fact away and then keep using what they're using. بدليل قول العباس حين قدمه عمر بدليل قول العباس حين قدمه عمر. This is proven by what Al-Abbas himself said when Umar brought him forward for the supplication. He said, Allahumma inna al-qawma tawajjahu bi ilayka limakani min nabik. Oh Allah, the people have indeed turned themselves by me to you because of my place to your prophets. My place here means my status. So he gave the reason why. It's not what the Wahhabi says. The Wahhabi is going to tell you he did it because Omar did that because the Prophet passed away. And Al-Abbas said they did it because of my status to your Prophet. So when the Wahhabi brings you this, if you want to see how much he doesn't understand the reference that he's giving you, you say to him, the reason though is mentioned in the Hadith. Then you see what he says. He's not even going to realize. So you say to him, when he fails to realize, and you repeat yourself a few times, you say to him, what did Al-Abbas himself say why the people did it? Tell me what he said. Don't tell me what you say why they did it. What did Al-Abbas say? Then he's going to realize, and then he's not going to want to answer you. فَتَبَيَّنَ بُطْلَانُ رَأْيِ ابْنِ تَيْمِيَةَ. And so Ibn Taymiyyah's opinion, it became clear. The invalidity of Ibn Taymiyyah's opinion has become clear. وَمَنْ تَبِعَهُ مِنْ مُنْكِرِ التَّوَسُّلِ. And the invalidity of the opinion of whoever followed him amongst those deniers of tawassul. So this is relatively recent, the denial of tawassul. Yani moderately recent, it's not ancient. Ibn Taymiyyah is what they call medieval scholar, medieval. It doesn't mean evil, E-V-I-L. That's time. So it's like 600 something years after the Prophet alayhi salatu wassalam. A little bit more than halfway between us and the Prophet. This is when Ibn Taymiyyah appeared. روى هذا الأثر الزبير بن بكار. Az-Zubayr ibn Bakkar reported this tradition. كما قال الحافظ ابن حجر, as Hafiz ibn Hajar said. ويستأنس له أيضا بما رواه الحاكم في المستدرك. And what makes that even more familiar is what Al-Hakim narrated in Al-Mustadrak. أن عمر رضي الله عنه خطب الناس. That Umar, may Allah accept from him, delivered a speech to the people. فقال أيها الناس. He said, O people, إن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم كان يرى للعباس ما يرى الولد لوالده. The Messenger of Allah indeed used to respect Al-Abbas like a son respects his father. يعظمه ويفخمه ويبر قسمه. He would respect him and honor him and يبر قسمه. I'll double check how to answer, how to translate that. فَقُتَدُوا أَيُّهَا النَّاسُ بِرَسُولِ اللَّهِ صَلَّى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وَسَلَّمَ فِي عَمِّهِ الْعَبَّاسِ. Umar said, so mimic, O people, the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wasallam concerning his treatment of his uncle Al-Abbas. وَاتَّخِذُوهُ وَسِيلَةً إِلَى اللَّهِ. فِيمَا نَزَلَ بِكُمْ, and take him as a means to Allah concerning the disaster that has befallen you. So that clarifies that it's not what the Wahhabi said. Umar didn't do this because the Prophet died, alayhi salatu wassalam. فَهَذَا يُوضِحُ سَبَبَ تَوَسُّلِ عُمَرَ بِالْعَبَّاسِ. This clarifies the reason of Umar's tawassul by Al-Abbas. So a lot of times a person would say something. So I'll say to the person, do you have a reference? Most of the time they won't have a reference. And if somebody has something he thinks is a reference, I'm going to say to him, let me see it. So then when he shows it to me, then most of the time it's not going to say anything that he's saying. Ash-SharH, the explanation. يفهم من هذا أن توسل عمر بالعباس كان لرعاية حق قرابته كان لرعاية حق قرابته كان لرعاية حق قرابته من رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم. It is understood from this that Umar's tawassul by Al-Abbas was due to observing his kinship to the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. فترك عمر التوسل بالنبي في ذلك الموضع ليس فيه دلالة على منع التوسل بغير الحي الحاضر. And so Umar's tawassul by the Prophet in that spot does not prove that it is forbidden to make tawassul by someone who's not alive and present. Subhanallah. فقد ترك النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم كثيرا من المباحات. The Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam abandoned many permissible things, not even forbidden, permissible. He did not do many permissible things. So his not doing them makes them not permissible? No, they're still permissible. He just didn't do them. فَهَلْ دَلَّ تَرْكُهُ لَهَا عَلَى حُرْمَتِهَا. Does his not doing these things prove that they are forbidden? So the answer is obviously no. Subhanallah. وَقَدْ ذَكَرَ الْعُلَمَاءُ فِي كُتُبِ الْأُصُولِ. The scholars have mentioned in the books of the fundamentals أَنَّ تَرْكَ الشَّيْءِ لَا يَدُلُّ عَلَى مَنْعِهِ, that not doing something does not prove that it is forbidden. وَقَدْ أَرَادَ سَيِّدُنَا عُمَرُ بِفِعْلِهِ ذَلِكَ أن يبين جواز التوسل بغير النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم من أهل الصلاح. Umar, our master Umar, wanted to clarify by this doing of his the permissibility of tawassul by other than the Prophet altogether, alayhi salatu wassalam. Doesn't have anything to do with being alive or present. Min ahli salah, that it is permissible to make tawassul by other than the Prophet amongst the people of piety. Mimman turja barakatuhu, concerning anyone that it's hoped to benefit from his blessing, because there are slaves of Allah who have blessing. There are slaves of Allah who are not prophets who have blessings. But Wahhabi doesn't like that idea, because Wahhabis are very arrogant people. The most Wahhabi will give you is that you're a sheikh or a scholar, and if you have some knowledge. But a Wahhabi won't give you being a wali, and he won't give you being someone who has blessings. You could never be to a Wahhabi someone who's worth touching, for example, or like rubbing your shoulder. Maybe you get a blessing from that one. For Wahhabi, This is, for Wahhabi, this is absolutely out of the question. If he saw the Muslims doing something like that to someone, he'd stand back, like, and cross his arms, for example, and look at them as, like, be shaking his head, saying, "Look at these people, look at these mushriks," or something like that. Look at these deviants, look at these Sufis. ولذا قال الحافظ ابن حجر في فتح الباري عقب هذه القصة ما نصه. This is why Hafiz ibn Hajar said in Fath al-Bari after this story, quote, يستفاد من قصة العباس استحباب الاستشفاع لأهل الخير والصلاح. يستفاد من قصة العباس استحباب الاستشفاع بأهل الخير والصلاح وأهل بيت النبوة. It is taken from the story of Al-Abbas, this one, the recommendation of seeking cure. No, I translated it wrong like this last time. Not seeking cure, seeking intercession. In previous lesson, I said seeking cure. I mixed something. Seeking intercession is istishfa'. Shafa'ah, not shifa'. In my mind, it's translating as shifa'. So he said, it is taken from the story of Al-Abbas, the recommendation of seeking intercession. So if you see somewhere that I said seeking cure in one of these, from this word, just fix it. Seeking intercession by the people of goodness and piety, and seeking intercession by the people of the Prophet's family, the prophetic family, the house of prophethood, which means the Prophet's family. Intaha, end quote. قال المؤلف رحمه الله فلا التفات بعد هذا إلى دعوى بعض هؤلاء المشوشين. So no regard is given after this to the claim of those troublemakers, those disruptors, al-mushawwishin, the people who make tashwish, disruption, like they stop you from concentrating. If you were reciting Quran, what does tashwish mean? It means if you were reciting Quran, or you're praying, or you're sleeping, then someone comes, makes a lot of noise, and he disrupts you, wakes you up, or breaks your concentration. Tashwish. So whoever does that is a mushawwish. The Shaykh says there's no regard given after this to the claim of some of those disruptors. أن الحديث المذكور في إسناده أبو جعفر. They say that hadith, that mentioned hadith, in its chain of narration is a man named Abu Ja'far, وهو رجل مجهول, and he is an unknown person. وَلَيْسَ كَمَا زَعَمُوا, and he is not as they claimed. What's the point of them saying he's an unknown person in the chain? To weaken the hadith and then to disregard the hadith altogether. That Wahhabi is going to say to you, this one, he's an unknown person, therefore this hadith is a lie altogether. He's not going to say this hadith is weak only. He's going to say, therefore this hadith is a complete lie. It's not going to be a lie just because there's an unknown person in there. Yeah, he might say it's a weak hadith, that's true. He might not say lie. But he would say to you, this hadith is a lie. Yeah, I have someone saying that to me. So I told him, give me a reference of someone who says what you said. So he gave me a long bunch of stuff in Arabic that doesn't say anything he said. I told him, show me who said it's a lie like you said. I had to repeat myself. Who said it's a lie like you said? And he never responded. بل أبو جعفر هذا هو أبو جعفر الخطمي ثقة. Rather, this Abu Ja'far that's in this chain of narration for this hadith, he's Abu Ja'far Al-Khatmi, and he is trustworthy. And we have here down in the footnote documentation of his trustworthiness. Let's see what it says here. This footnote says, I'll just translate directly. Ibn Ma'in and An-Nasa'i and Ibn Hibban and Ibn Numayr and Al-Ajli and At-Tabarani have all accredited this man, Abu Ja'far, as documented in the book called At-Tahdhib, and here's the page number and the volume number. Which volume and the page number? But those numbers are going to depend on the publication. And as for the narrator, this Abu Ja'far being Al-Khatmi and not another Abu Ja'far, so as for this narrator, Abu Ja'far being Al-Khatmi, as for this narrator, he is Abu Ja'far Al-Khatmi. As explicitly said by those who produced the hadith. Some of them, amongst them is At-Tirmidhi in his Sunan, and Al-Hakim in Al-Mustadrak, and Ibn Sunni in Amal al-Yawmi wal-Layla, and others. They said, from Abu Ja'far al-Madani, and he is Al-Khatmi. Except At-Tirmidhi, he didn't say he's Madani, but they all said he's Khatmi. Also, Imam Ahmad in Al-Musnad, in his Musnad, said he is Khatmi, Al-Khatmi. And Al-Tabarani called him in the big and small mu'jams Al-Khatmi Al-Madani. So this is enough to be sure that this Abu Ja'far is Al-Khatmi and not someone else. Yani, he is not unknown. So if a Wahhabi told me that he's unknown, I'd say to him, I might say to him, he's not unknown. Or I might say to him, do you have a reference? If he doesn't have one, I'll tell him, don't say this. Don't say this. Bring a reference first. If he has a reference, I'll say, show it to me. Let me see it. And then we'll see. If it's from Al-Albani or Ibn Taymiyah, I'm going to say to him, do you have a reference from anyone else? Do you have a reference from someone that we don't dispute about his reliability? If I tell you Shaykh Abdullah said, or Al-Ghumari said, or Al-Kawthari said, you're going to throw them back to me. Why do you get to tell me Al-Albani said and Ibn Taymiyah said, and you know I don't accept from them? Do you have anything that we agree about, like Al-Hakim or Al-Bayhaqi or someone that we're not going to argue about whether he's reliable or not? Because all these ones I can name for you, you accept them. Ibn Ma'in and An-Nasa'i and Ibn Hibban, you accept all of these. At-Tabarani, you have no argument against all of these scholars that I could name for you. Why are you going to tell me Al-Albani or Ibn Taymiyah? That's all you have? That's all you have. The Shaykh says, وَكَذَلِكَ دَعْوَى بَعْضِهِمْ. And likewise, the claim of one of them, وَهُوَ نَاصِرُ الدِّينِ الْأَلْبَانِي, who happens to be Nasiruddin Al-Albani, أن مراد الطبراني بقوله والحديث الصحيح القدر الأصلي. What's his claim? That when At-Tabarani said about this hadith is authentic, all he meant was the original portion of the story that happened with the Prophet. وهو ما فعله الرجل الأعمى في حياة رسول الله فقط. The original portion of the hadith, which is what the blind man did during the life of the Prophet. According to Al-Albani, when At-Tabarani said the hadith is authentic, he only meant this portion of the hadith. Because you know the way the hadith is presented. According to At-Tabarani, he started telling the story that there was a man who needed something from the Caliph, Uthman ibn Affan, and he was going back and forth to the Caliph. So the whole hadith starts out after the Prophet's death in the first place. The whole report. And then the Caliph would not take care of this man's needs, so he met the other companion named Uthman ibn Hunayf. He complained to him about that. Uthman ibn Hunayf taught him the dua. And then the man got his need fulfilled. And then after he got his need fulfilled, he went back to Uthman ibn Hunayf and he said, may Allah reward you. He wouldn't address me until you spoke to him for me. So he said, Wallahi, I didn't speak to him. However, I witnessed the messenger of Allah when a blind man came to him. So here's where the portion that happened during the Prophet's life comes into the report. Al-Albani said, when At-Tabarani said this hadith is authentic, he only meant this part of the hadith. The part where the blind man came to the Prophet and said what he said, and then the Prophet told him to go make dua, etc. Not all what happened later, which is the beginning of the report. So that's what Al-Albani said. Typical Wahhabi answer. So the Shaykh said, likewise, what some of them claim, what one of them, that's Al-Albani, what he claimed, that what At-Tabarani meant when he said the hadith is authentic is just the original portion of the story, of the report, which is what the blind man did during the Prophet's life only, alayhi salatu wassalam. وَلَيْسَ مُرَادُهُ مَا فَعَلَهُ الرَّجُلُ أَيَّامَ عُثْمَانَ بْنِ عَفَّانَ. And Al-Albani would say, he does say, when At-Tabarani said the hadith is authentic, he didn't mean the portion of the report that tells about what the man did during the days of Uthman ibn Affan, بعد وفاة الرسول, after the Prophet's death, after the Messenger's death. That's what he would tell a person. So, look at that. What does it benefit Al-Albani to mislead a person like this? Yani, Al-Albani saying something here that's just not true. That At-Tabarani, when he said the hadith is authentic, what he meant was only one portion of the report. So that's false. What benefit does Al-Albani get out of this falsehood? Because it is actually false in reality. So what does he get out of this falsehood? that someone else would take it. What he wants is for someone to take that falsehood and accept it. That makes him mudil, a misguider, a misleader, someone who misguides the slaves of God. Subhanallah wa bihamdi. It's important to recognize the people who they believe in something, and because they want others to believe what they believe, they will just say something. It doesn't have to be true. They will say something so that others will agree with them. That's what they want. Do we merely want people to agree with us? We don't just want people to agree with us. We want people to be on the truth. Yani, this is the type of thing you would hear from people who are into politics. So they believe their party is right, or another party is wrong, or their position is right, or something like that. So they're just going to say anything so that you agree. It doesn't really matter that it's right or wrong. لأن علماء المصطلح قالوا وهذا مردود. And what Al-Albani claimed is rejected. لأن علماء المصطلح قالوا, because the scholars of hadith terminology said الحديث يطلق على المرفوع إلى النبي والموقوف على الصحابة. They said the word hadith is used for a prophetic hadith and for a tradition that is stopped at the companions, not a prophetic hadith. So the word hadith is not restricted to a prophetic hadith. أي أن كلام الرسول يسمى حديثا. This means that the messenger's speech is called a hadith. وقول الصحابي يسمى حديثا. And a companion's saying is also called a hadith. So, therefore, when At-Tabarani said the hadith is authentic, he was not excluding the part that happened with the companions after the Prophet died. His usage of the word hadith does not prove that he's not referring to the portion of the story that happened after the Prophet's death, alayhi salatu wassalam. وَلَيْثَ لَفْظُ الْحَدِيثِ مَقْصُورًا عَلَى كَلَامِ النَّبِيِّ عَلَى كَلَامِ النَّبِيِّ فَقَطُ فِي اصْطِلَاحِهِمْ. The word hadith is not limited to the talk of the Prophet only in the terminology of the hadith scholars. وَهَذَا الْمُمَوِّهُ كَلَامُهُ لَا يُوَافِقُ الْمُقَرَّرَ فِي عِلْمِ الْمُصْطَلَحِ. And this faker, that's Al-Albani, this gaslighter, his talk does not agree with what is settled in the science of hadith terminology. Although he's supposed to be, according to the Wahhabis, the brightest hadith scholar of our day. فَلْيَنْظُرْ مَنْ شَاءَ فِي كِتَابِ تَدْرِيبِ الرَّاوِي. So let whoever wants look into the book Tadrib al-Rawi by As-Suyuti. Wal-Ifsah. And also let him look into the hadith book called Al-Ifsah وغيرهما من كتب المصطلح, and let him look into other hadith terminology books. فإن الألباني لم يجره إلى هذه الدعوة إلا شدة تعصبه لهواه. Indeed, Al-Albani, nothing dragged him into this claim but his deep bigotry, his obsession with his own preference, وعدم مبالاته, and his carelessness, بمخالفة العلماء, his not caring to go against the scholars, كسلفه ابن تيمية, like his predecessor Ibn Taymiyah. أما حديث ابن عباس الذي رواه الترمذي. As for the hadith of Ibn Abbas that's narrated by At-Tirmidhi, أن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم قال له, that the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم said to Ibn Abbas, إذا سألت فاسأل الله, if you ask, then ask Allah. وإذا استعنت فاستعن بالله, and if you seek help, seek the help of Allah. So this is another perfect example of what we're saying, as you're going to see now. فليس فيه دليل أيضا على منع التوسل بالأنبياء والأولياء. This hadith does not contain also any evidence for the impermissibility of making tawassul by prophets and saints. If you ask, then ask Allah. And if you seek help, then seek the help of Allah. It's just that sometimes when a Wahhabi presents some of these things to you, if you're not familiar with their way, you think he has a point. Or also, if you're not familiar with the Quran and the Sunnah, like even if you don't know how a Wahhabi is, but at least you have some education in the interpretation of the Quran and the Sunnah, then when a Wahhabi brings you something he considers proof and he makes his argument, you're going to say, how did you get there from here? This doesn't even say what you are saying. But if you lack this much and you don't know about Wahhabis, then you might think he has a point. He's trying to make a point here from this hadith. إِذَا سَأَلْتَ فَاسْأَلِ اللَّهِ, if you ask, then ask Allah. وَإِذَا اسْتَعَنْتَ فَاسْتَعِنْ بِاللَّهِ, and if you seek help from Allah. This doesn't prove that it's not permissible to make tawassul by the prophets and the saints. لأن الحديث معناه أن الأولى بأن يسأل ويستعان به الله تعالى. Because what this hadith means is that the best to be asked and the best for his help to be sought is God. Exalted is He. وَلَيْسَ مَعْنَاهُ لَا تَسْأَلْ غَيْرَ اللَّهِ. And the hadith doesn't mean, there's not a way really to interpret it to mean, do not ask someone other than God. So what's the hadith? إِذَا سَأَلْتَ فَاسْأَلِ اللَّهِ. If you ask, then ask Allah. So that doesn't mean لا تسأل غير الله. Do not ask other than Allah. That's how a Wahhabi is going to get something past you. He'd give you the hadith. If you ask, then ask Allah. That's what the Prophet said. So why would you ask other than Allah? Don't ask other than Allah. Like that. You flip it right there. He's going to put it into the words he wants it to mean, which is what his creed is. And it's not found in the hadith actually. وَلَا تَسْتَعِنْ بِغَيْرِ اللَّهِ. He would say, don't seek help from someone other than God. So the hadith doesn't mean that. نظير ذلك قوله صلى الله عليه وسلم. The like of that is when the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, لا تصاحب إلا مؤمنا, do not accompany but a believer. ولا يأكل طعامك إلا تقي, and no one eats your food but a pious man. Pious man or woman. فكما لا يفهم من هذا الحديث عدم جواز صحبة غير المؤمن. So just as it's not understood from this hadith that it's not permissible to be in the company of someone other than a believer. وإطعام غير تقي. And just like it's not understood from this hadith that it's impermissible to feed someone who's not God-fearing. وإنما يفهم منه أن الأولى في الصحبة المؤمن. And that all that's understood from this hadith is that the most deserving of companionship is a believer or a believer. وأن الأولى بالإطعام هو التقي. And that the most befitting one to feed is a God-fearing person. كذلك حديث ابن عباس لا يفهم منه إلا الأولوية. Likewise, this hadith of Ibn Abbas, إذا سألت فاسأل الله, if you ask then ask Allah. وإذا استعنت فاستعن بالله, and if you seek help then seek the help of Allah. All that's understood from that is what's better. وأما التحريم الذي يدعونه فليس في هذا الحديث. But concerning the prohibition that those people claim, it does not exist in this hadith. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك.